There's Philip with his face and not just a big P this time.
Sorry, I was trying to switch over to my computer, but then the login's only on. Well, it's just too much technology. I think I'll just go with this.
It looks like we're recording. Staff, okay to start the meeting?
Jeff,
Yes.
just a sec here.
Our
Okay,
counselor's going to log off and back on.
Technician says we're good to go.
All right. I think Counselor Wynn was going to log off and log back on, so I'll give him a second to rejoin, and then we'll start.
Okay.
Right. Good evening and welcome everyone to the Monday, October 12th, 2020 Plan Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Jean, would you please call the roll?
Beckett,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Heap,
Here.
Pepe,
Here.
Semler,
Here.
Stewart,
Here.
and Whitman seems to be absent. Okay.
All right, thank you. We have quorum, so we'll continue with the meeting. First on the agenda is a council update. I see Councilor Wynn has joined us. Councilor Wynn, would you like to give us a council update? I think Councilor Wynn was having some audio issues. He couldn't hear us. So we'll give him one more second. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next agenda item and see if we can come back. Yeah, it seems like Councilor Wynn, his video doesn't appear to be working. So we'll move on, and then if he reestablishes a connection with audio, we'll come back. So next on the agenda is this regarding issues not on the agenda. This is an opportunity to raise issues regarding planning. A time limit of 3 minutes per individual applies. To speak during the meeting, it was requested that you email Iris McCaleb by noon today to receive the information. Written comments submitted by noon the day of the meeting will be shared during the citizen comment period. Jean, did we have anyone who wished to make a citizen comment tonight?
We do not.
Right. Next, we'll move on to the Commission for Citizen Involvement general updates. I do have two postcards that I wanted to read. The first one is from the Uplands Neighborhood Association. There's a general membership meeting that will be held Thursday, October 29th at 4 p.m. via Zoom. It's the Uplands Neighborhood's annual meeting to discuss what's happening in Uplands. The guest speaker will be Stefan Brodus, Assistant City Engineer, to talk about the Uplands Road rehabilitation. There'll also be discussion on standing committees, from standing committees, emergency preparedness, land use, open recreation, transportation, trees, and natural resources. They're proposing bylaw changes to reflect current practices. And then they'll also have annual Uplands Board of Directors nominations and elections. So I encourage anyone in the Uplands Neighborhood Association to join the general membership meeting. Again, that's Thursday, October 29th at 4 p.m. via Zoom. If you'd like to receive a Zoom invitation, you can contact Bob Irvin, and that was Bob and Mignon, M-I-G-N-O-N. Again, that's B-O-B-A-N-D mignon@comcast.net for that. This postcard that we got for citizen involvement is from the Bryant Neighborhood Association to everyone to attend their annual meeting. To receive the Zoom invitation for the annual meeting, please email bnasso.18@gmail.com for Bryant Neighborhood Association.18@gmail.com by October 27th. So the agenda is election of the officers, and then updates to the Bryant Neighborhood Association survey, Prep LO, tree preservation, the bus barn, Jean and Pilkington intersection, LO municipal golf course redevelopment, Lucier Farm development, and I-205 toll at Stafford Road. There will also be new business, Facebook groups, resource list, engagement, and how everyone can get involved. So I encourage anyone in the Bryant Neighborhood Association to attend their annual meeting. That was it for general updates. Next, I'd like to move on to the minutes. These are the minutes from September 28th, 2020. Commissioners, any changes? Any changes, deletions, additions folks would like to make to the September 28th, 2020 meeting minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Commissioner Fisher has made a motion to accept the meeting minutes for September 28th, 2020. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Beckett has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. Yeah, the minutes are approved. I'll check back. I'm not sure if Councilor Nguyen was able to rejoin us. I don't see him. So we'll move ahead then on the agenda. It's item number 7 on the agenda, findings, conclusions, and order. This is the 2020 Annual Community Development Code Amendments, LU 20-0015. Public testimony is not accepted tonight. On September 28th, 2020, the Plan Commission made a preliminary recommendation that the City Council approve the proposed code amendments as written in staff report and return with draft findings, conclusions, and order. Attorney Boone or staff, any comments that staff or Attorney Boone you'd like to make?
Well, I don't have the findings in front of me, but they would just reflect what the deliberation was at the commission, and that was just to adopt the findings set forth in the staff report. There wasn't any special findings that the commission made.
Correct. Commissioners, any discussion, or is there a motion to approve the?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Stewart to approve the 2020 Annual Community Development Code Amendments, LU 20-0015, that staff has prepared. There was a second by Commissioner Pape. Jean, would you please call the roll?
Beckett,
Yes.
Fisher, Heap,
Yes.
Pepe,
Yes.
Semler,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Whitman, he's absent. Okay.
Okay, great. The motion is approved, and the Community Development Code Amendments, LU 20-0015, is approved. Councilor Nguyen, sorry you were having some technical difficulties there. I'd like to give you an opportunity to come back, and would you like to present a council update?
Sure. Thank you for your patience there. I could see everybody, but I couldn't hear anything. So
No problem. Thank you.
my apologies. So yes, last time I gave an update was in the middle of summer, and lots happened since then. Not to mention wildfires and natural disasters. But I just want to give you a quick overview, some highlights of some of the meetings that we had. Gosh, we had probably, aside from different executive sessions and emergency meetings, we've had I believe, 3 or 4 meetings since then. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. Starting back with the one on September 1st, we had looked at your recommendation. The Planning Commission has suggested that we amend the Lake Oswego City Code for the purpose of allowing seasonal restaurant enclosures for restaurants. I think that was a very thorough report there, and I think that we all agree we had to do something to help the restaurants out and help small business in general cope with some of the consequences of the pandemic. So we had tentatively approved ordinance 2051 and directed staff to come back and provide the final version of the ordinance, which they did, I think the next meeting after that. So thank you for the Planning Commission for preparing that and providing us guidance on that. And then moving on to, at that same meeting, we also discussed the Lake Oswego Recreation Aquatic Center design contract, and council authorized the city manager to move forward with a contract with Scott Edwards Architecture in the amount of roughly over 2.5 million for preparation of 100% construction documents for the Recreation Aquatic Center at the municipal golf course. So that's coming along. And moving on to the September 8th meeting, we had listened to an appeal of the DRC's approval of a 160-unit multifamily residential housing project on Meadows Road. And we, as council, we moved to tentatively affirm the DRC's recommendation to allow that to move forward. So there was a vote on that. It was a 5-2 split, but we had a majority on that, so that was allowed to proceed. And then on the 15th, we had a project up on North Anchor. On North Anchor project, the developer, Urban Development Partners, came to us and also introduced their design team. They introduced the developer, of course, and then also the architect for the multifamily, the architect for the hotel portion, and also the general contractor. And so it looks like that's moving ahead. There are a few more things that we need to still finish up before we actually finalize the DDA, but those are, I'm sure, are in the works. And so there'll be more things coming down the pipeline on that. Also at the same meeting, we also had our first DI task force update. The task force came up with a statement for us as council to review and approve. Council decided that we were going to make some modifications and then come up with a different version, which was published and approved. We also passed a resolution for the city of Lake Oswego and the city of Portland to cooperate on potential placement of the Triangle Creek wastewater treatment plant via a public-private partnership. So there'll be more to come on that. And the next meeting we had was, most recent one we had was October 6th. We had passed resolution 20-27, modifying the building division's permit fees and plan review fees in response to implementation of the state of Oregon's permitting system. So it just brought our permit fees, which were unusually low, and brought them in line with what other municipalities are charging, and also allows us to be able to actually implement and be part of the state of Oregon's permitting system. And then there's been a lot of talk about Helen and Woods. I'm not sure if it bubbles up to a planning commission or not. I'm sure you heard through the grapevine, but there's been a lot of community support of that, a lot of action around that, and council is pleased to report that we are in fruitful negotiations. We were originally going to pass a resolution of public necessity to acquire the property. In other words, I'm not sure all the legal jargon, but essentially condemn the property if we needed to in order to acquire it. But we didn't move forward with that resolution because there was some fruitful negotiations going on between the property owner and the city. So more to come on that later. Also, at the last meeting, we also awarded a personal services contract to West Yost for engineering services. We needed to do water system studies to evaluate the condition of our reservoirs and such that our water system infrastructure is in place. So there was I didn't realize how many reservoirs there were throughout the city, but there are a lot of them, and some of them need to be evaluated and potentially, depending on condition, modifications or improvements need to be made to them. So we awarded a contract of roughly $898,000 to do that. So we expect to see something back on that probably early next year. And then the council also moved to approve some traffic signal improvements for the Jean Road and Pilkington intersection. So staff had presented a couple of options, and the staff had determined that the best solution for that one would be to have a signal there instead of a roundabout, which was one of the alternatives. So that work is going to be starting very soon. And lastly, at the last meeting, we also we also approved a contract to purchase some furniture for City Hall. So that's another sign that City Hall is moving along and we're getting close. And so council approved a contract to purchase furniture in the amount of roughly $140,000 to furnish City Hall and all the departments. That also includes the judges' chambers and the council chambers, as well as other departments such as police. Though, what I understand is that some of the furniture that's currently in City Hall will be reused as much as possible, with other stuff being sent to surplus, the things that don't fit or can't be modified to fit in the new City Hall. So with that, that's kind of the highlights of the last 3 or 4 meetings we've had. So and that was a lot to cover in a few minutes, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Commissioner, any questions for Councillor Nguyen?
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner Beckett, go ahead.
What is the forecast on when you'll be able to move into the City Hall?
What I'm hearing is sometime, I believe, mid next year sometime. I think probably after the summer, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to be having there's going to be some tours of the facility later this week, and so I think that's one of the questions I'll be asking is that. But then also I'm also curious to know what with the pandemic, how that is going to impact how we're able to meet not only council but also all the boards and commissions that use the council chambers for their meetings. So I'd be very interested to see what measures we have in place to do that, and if we are even able to do that next year. So, but yeah, my understanding sometime mid next year.
Councillor Nguyen, I did have one question. As you're discussing the improvements to the golf course, is the land use going to be a pure aquatic center? Or is it also a recreational center too?
I believe it's going to include a dry side, a rec portion of it too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions for Councillor Nguyen? No? All right. Thank you for the update tonight, Councillor Nguyen. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So moving back to our next agenda item, this is item number 8 on the agenda. This is a public hearing. It's Community Development Code and Comprehensive Plan Amendments to Subareas I and I-A of the Marylhurst campus, LU 20-0016. Public testimony is accepted. Anyone that wished to provide testimony should have emailed Iris at ccaleb@lakeoswego.city by noon of today. This is a request by the Society of the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary to amend the Lake Oswego Development Community Development Code and the Marylhurst Area Special District Plan in Volume 2 of the Comprehensive Plan in order to add affordable multifamily dwellings as a permitted use in phases 1 and -1A of the campus institutional CI zone on the former Marylhurst University campus site. No actual development is proposed at this time. The property is located at 17600 Pacific Highway. The staff coordinator is Jessica Nanamulu, planning manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and outline the hearing procedure.
Thank you,
Um,
Attorney Boone.
Thank you. And the highlight is this is unlike most of the legislative hearings that the Planning Commission hears. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, public hearing, in that it involves just a few parcels of property, 3 parcels of property. And as a quasi-judicial hearing procedure, then the criteria are much more defined, and the commission doesn't have the broad legislative discretion that it usually has. The question will be whether it meets the criteria and standards set forth in the comprehensive plan. With that slight overview, the hearing process is akin to the DRC. This land use request is based upon the applicable criteria and standards, and the staff report lists the criteria and staff identified lists the criteria and that was identified by staff applicable to the request. It was available online, and you must identify any additional criteria you believe applies. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria. Please specifically identify to the commission the criteria or standards you are addressing so the commission may consider that testimony in relation to the criteria or standards you are addressing. If you do not identify the criteria you are addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you are testifying about and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issue to the City Council and to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes action for damages in circuit court. The hearing process is as follows. First, there'll be a presentation by staff, Jessica Namanalu, planning manager. Then there'll be testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes, then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and finally testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed speak up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following that will be the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. Because it's an electronic meeting, a virtual meeting, following testimony, then any person who wishes to testify who hasn't signed up still has the opportunity to do so, but you should do so quickly because YouTube has some delay. You may request to do so by contacting Kat Klug at 503-635-0286 and leave your name, of course, and contact information so that she can arrange to have you join on the testimony. All right. The time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed the person is testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. At this point, I'm going to pause again and give the contact information to Kat Klug. That's again 503-635-0286, or you can email her at kklug, that's KKLUGE @lakeoswego.city. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you have any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, and if you have any financial conflicts of interest. Mr. Chair, if you'll go ahead and make that disclosure, then poll the commission.
Sure, thank you, Attorney Boone.
So, and again, ex parte contacts, site visit, bias, financial conflicts of interest.
For myself, ex parte, none, site visits, none, and financial conflicts, none.
And no
Like-
bias?
No bias.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Beckett?
I did take a drive through the campus a week ago just to see with my own eyes what it looked like. Does that constitute a site visit?
Yes, that's a site visit. Thank you. So it was a week ago. All right. Any ex parte contacts?
And no bias.
Have you received any ex parte contacts, any communication from people
No, I
for or
haven't.
against this? Okay. And no financial conflict of interest.
No.
Thank you, Commissioner Beckett. Commissioner Stemler?
None to all four, if I can say that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Pepe? Vice Chair Pepe?
I did make a site visit. Outside of that, I have no ex parte contact and no bias.
Commissioner Fisher?
No to all four.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitman?
Yeah, no to all four, and I don't know what happened on Zoom, but I was not in on Zoom until probably 3 minutes ago. So I was present at the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't even know you were meeting.
All right, thank you.
Nobody let you in.
Commissioner Stewart?
I've had no ex parte contacts, no financial interest. I made a site visit on Saturday, spent about 45 minutes there walking around. Now, as far as bias goes, Mr. Boone, what constitutes bias?
Bias is the inability to make a decision based upon the criteria and the standards that you receive evidence, you receive the testimony.
Right.
Are you able to apply the criteria to that testimony and decide whether or not you should make a recommendation to council to approve the application for the code amendments or not?
Yeah, yes, I can. I will state for the record, though, I was employed by Marylhurst from 2004 to 2008 as a adjunct professor, but that will not affect any decisions that I make.
Great, thank you. We've polled all the commissioners.
All right. I would ask the audience either now or as you testify, if there's any challenge to commissioners' right to consider the application, please state so. Hearing none at this point, Jessica Numanaluk, Planning Manager for the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. Good evening, commissioners. I am Jessica Numanaluk, the staff planner for this project. And I do want to start off by acknowledging or entering some new exhibits into the record. I know that earlier today, all the commissioners were distributed a supplemental staff report, which had supplemental findings under the Goal 10 housing planning goal. And you also received Exhibit F6, which was an applicant's response to some of the comments that had been received previously. We have been having some issues with posting and sending you some of the other exhibits that have been received. We received exhibits G3 through G8, which was testimony neither for nor against the application. G101 through G122, which was in support of the application, and G202 through G208, which was in opposition to the application. I learned late this afternoon that our support staff was having some connection problems and also issues with the handling of these exhibits and weren't able to get them to you. So, Mr. Boone, considering that we are missing a number of exhibits that the commissioners have not been able to review, does that mean we'll need to continue the hearing on this since they have not been made available before the hearing?
Well, unless they could read it during the hearing, so it all, we can decide that when we get to the end. And there'll be an opportunity to ask people whether they wish to continue the hearing anyway. So,
Okay.
but yes, the commissioners need to review the evidence before they deliberate.
Yeah. So I really apologize for those technical difficulties, but we will get you those exhibits as soon as possible. All right, so I am going to start my presentation by hopefully sharing my screen here.
Start video.
And can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. It's so nice when something goes right. So the proposal before you tonight are comprehensive plan and community development code amendments that would allow multifamily residential use in the CI zone, but it would be limited to subareas 1 and 1A of the Marylhurst campus. There's been some confusion, particularly in the comments that I received and some phone calls as exactly what constitutes the area that would be subject to this code amendment. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to be crystal clear as to what area of the campus that we're talking about. I have a few maps here to show you. So first of all, this red outlined area does constitute subareas 1 and 1A, and I'll have an additional map that also illustrates that from the comprehensive plan. This area of the campus is about 50 acres in size, and it takes access from Pacific Highway. There's one access here. To the north and northwest of the site is the Mary's Woods development, and also kind of further north up here. And that area of the site it has a variety of uses: continuing care retirement complex, single family homes, there's convent and administrative buildings, as well as some limited commercial uses. The abutting properties to the south are all residential, and they're located in West Lynn. Properties to the west across the highway are in Lake Oswego, but zoned R10. And then, of course, to the east, you have the Willamette River, and it abuts Old River Road. The site is developed with 15 buildings that were previously used by the Marylhurst University. And that university, is, I'm sure you're all aware of, ceased operations in 2018. And the sisters, the applicant, took over ownership of that. 5 of the buildings are actually designated as historic landmarks, and these are these blue stars that you see here on the map. And they are protected by special regulations that protects the historic character of those buildings. And there's also the cemetery site, which is a historic site in our code. This is a zoning map because I want to be clear that the CI zone is only on the Marylhurst campus. There is no other CI zone in the rest of the city. So that's why this is a quasi-judicial hearing, because it's limited to just a few properties. As you can see, there's CI zone in Mary's Woods as well as the Marylhurst campus. But as far as the proposed code amendments, it only impacts subareas, excuse me. I have a tendency to want to call it phases for some reason, so you excuse me if I make that mistake, but it's subareas 1 and 1A. It's zoned completely campus institutional. There is CI in Mary's Woods, but it is not affected. I also want to make it very clear, because there was some concern that the site included the area along Highway 43, and it does not. Okay, so this area along here, as you can see, is actually in the CI/OC zone, but this is actually located in subarea 2 of the campus, and so it is not included. We're just talking about this light blue area here of the site. This is a map that shows all the subareas of the Marylhurst campus. And you'll note, actually, what's interesting is that the title of this, which is actually in our comprehensive plan, as well as in Appendix F of the Community Development Code, it's an appendix to the CI zone. It actually refers to the entire site, including Mary's Woods, as the Marylhurst campus. But I think most people think of just the Marylhurst campus as sort of this area here in subareas 1 and 1A. But technically, that is the title of the entire district. But we are just talking about subareas 1 and 1A. And as you can see, subarea 1A is kind of this narrow, skinny strip. But it doesn't fit neatly across tax lots. So I think the applicant has included it just because it's a clearly defined chunk of the campus for this to apply to. I don't know that they necessarily propose to ever do multifamily in this skinny little area, but it is technically in part of the area subject to the code amendments. But I just want to reiterate, this area along Highway 43, which has been the subject of a lot of comments, is not included in this area. It is limited to just this area, subareas 1 and 1A. This is the comprehensive plan map, which shows that as far as the overall zoning of the site under the comprehensive plan, it's zoned CI, which is campus institutional. And this map also shows the protected resource protection districts, which are the stream corridors that exist on the site. As far as subareas 1 and 1A here, you can see basically almost the entire perimeter is surrounded by these protected districts, which also serves as a buffer between the adjacent residential areas. And the proposed code would not affect these protected buffers. They would remain protected. No development is allowed in there, or else very limited development. Things like unavoidable utility crossings would be allowed, trails, those types of things. But as far as buildings, would not be allowed within those protected areas. While there is a lot of interest in future development of multifamily housing on the site, should the proposed amendment be approved, I really want to emphasize that this application does not include development. You are not here tonight to review whether a proposed multifamily dwelling on this site would comply with the code. The application is for amendments to the comp plan and the CDC that would allow multifamily residential as a permitted use in subareas 1 and 1A of the CI zone. If it's approved, the applicant would need to apply for a land use application for the specific development proposal in the future. And that would require public notice and a hearing before the development review commission. So if these amendments are approved tonight, the applicant could come back later and they would have to go through a DRC hearing, public notice, et cetera, for any future development on the site. Having said that, I know that there's understandably a lot of interest in multifamily development might be located on the sites and how many units. And what the applicant has indicated in their application is that they intend to replace the obsolete dormitories for the former Marylhurst University with approximately 75 to 100 units of affordable housing. And that's this red area here that I've outlined. These are where the 3 dormitories that they plan to tear down. And my understanding is that's where they would put any new multifamily development on the site. But again, I do want to emphasize that this application is not for the review of future development, but rather the proposed code amendments. So there are, as you can read in the staff report that was about 34 pages long, there are numerous comp plan policies and other statewide planning goals, et cetera, that are applicable to the proposal. You'll find that a lot of them address the same or similar themes. And so I am not going to go over each and every one. We don't want to be here all night. Hopefully you've had a chance to read over the report. Instead, what I plan to do is cover some of the key policies, particularly those that relate to comments that we received. And so we're going to start out with the land use planning chapter of the comp plan. Some of the key policies are to maintain land use regulations and standards that minimize and or mitigate adverse traffic impacts generated by new development. We got a lot of comments about traffic. Assure adequate public facilities and services, design quality, buffering between dissimilar uses, and open space. And then applying clear and objective standards for residential development. This is not only a comp plan policy, but it's also a state law that we are required to provide the opportunity for residential development to be subject to clear and objective standards. So generally, for the land use comp plan policies to be met, the applicant has to demonstrate either that there are already existing land use regulations that future multifamily development will be subject to that meet the comp plan policies, or that new regulations that comply with the comp plan policies are proposed that would be applicable to future multifamily development. So in looking at these land use planning policies with regard to the traffic impacts, there are existing regulations that to require public notice and opportunity for comment on traffic impacts from a specific proposal, and to require transportation system improvements that are reasonably related to and roughly proportional to the specific development impacts, and to mitigate the impacts of the development upon the transportation system. Additionally, the applicant is proposing a new code standard that would establish a trip cap for sub-areas 1 and 1A. And what that trip cap would do is it would limit the combined uses on the site, including the future multifamily uses, to 351 trips during the PM peak hour and 327 trips during the AM peak hour. And what this trip cap is it's equal to the vested trips that were generated by the former university. The new code standard is a site-specific standard and so would apply to all uses on the site, not just to future development applications. So regardless, if a land use application came in, they would have to show compliance with that standard, or if a new use were to locate in one of the vacant buildings on the site, they would also have to show compliance with that trip cap standard. With regard to the other standards about adequate public facilities, design quality, et cetera, we have existing standards. We have the utility standard, building design standard, landscaping and open space standards of the Community Development Code. And these assure adequate public services, design quality, buffering between dissimilar uses, and open space are required for development, including multifamily development. So that would apply to any future development, those existing code standards. With regard to the clear and objective standard requirement for residential development, 2 new standards are proposed to address this. The first would be to exempt residential development from the CI zone Appendix F, which, as I alluded to before, it actually contains policies taken from the Marylhurst Special Area District Plan. And a lot of those policies are not clear and objective, and so we cannot legally apply those to residential development. And so to address this issue, residential development would be specifically exempted from compliance with that appendix. And instead, we would apply our existing building design standards in the Community Development Code, which is found in 50.06.0015 and 50.06.0017. And these standards give the applicant an option of either applying a discretionary review track for the residential development or a clear and objective review track. And so that complies with our state law that we have to provide a clear and objective option for the applicant. The second amendment proposed that addresses this is there's an existing subjective setback standard in the CI zone that says that the setbacks in the CI zone are those that are, quote, needed to maintain the appearance and character of the Marylhurst campus. So very, very subjective. So instead, a new setback standard would be established that would apply only to multifamily development, and it would require that multifamily buildings be set back equal to the height of the proposed building from any residentially zoned property. And it doesn't matter if the property is in the city or in West Lynn, that setback would apply to any adjacent residentially zoned property. And so as discussed in the staff report and here, staff found that these policies are met. Another key policy under the Complete Neighborhoods and Housing chapter of the comp plan is to provide and maintain zoning and development regulations that allow the opportunity to develop an adequate supply and variety of housing types and that accommodate the needs of future and existing Lake Oswego residents. So the need for additional multifamily housing in the city is actually identified in the adopted 2013 housing needs analysis. And that analysis identified that Lake Oswego needed about just over 2,300 new high density units by 2035 to meet projected population forecast and attainability levels. And the proposed code amendments to allow multifamily housing in subareas 1 and 1A of the CI zone would meet this policy by allowing the opportunity for development of multifamily housing types on a site that would not displace opportunities for other housing types. In addition, this policy requires a variety of housing types, and the applicant is supportive of a code amendment that would require a portion of the multifamily units on the site to meet affordability criteria. And these would be the same criteria that are found in LOC 39.06.105, which allows an exemption to system development charges for developments that meet certain housing affordability criteria. So essentially all the housing or a portion of the all housing that would be built on the site would need to meet these affordability criteria, and the applicant is willing to do this. The next key policy I want to discuss is under the Connected Community chapter of the comp plan, and it talks about providing street and frontage improvements, encouraging alternative transportation modes, maintaining arterial and major collector streets at level of service E or better during peak hours, and then mitigating the impacts of traffic on neighborhood collectors. So some of the same themes that we saw under the land use planning. There are already existing code requirements relating to when street and frontage improvements, landscaping, street lighting, transit, those types of things are required for development. And future development, multifamily development in this area would be subject to those same standards. So we do have existing standards in place. With regard to maintaining level of service E or better at intersections during peak hours, and then also mitigating traffic impacts, as I discussed previously, the proposed trip cap would limit the combination of uses on the site, subareas 1 and 1A, to generate no more AM and PM peak hours than the prior university. So this will assure no new impacts to intersections or nearby streets, since the combined uses in the subareas can't exceed the vested peak hour trip generation of the prior university. So it's basically a wash, right? The same impacts from the prior university use with the trip cap for any future uses on the site. Another key policy is the Marylhurst Area Special District Plan. This requires, this one establishes a mix of uses within the Marylhurst campus that would be allowed, including educational, cultural, social, government, and residential activities. It also talks specifically about subarea 1A has to be located in a major building and no more than 2 buildings. So first of all, the proposal to add multifamily residential use is consistent with the policy for the district to include a mix of uses, because it does discuss residential use. And the applicant is also proposing to add to this policy office to the mix of uses. And this is more of a housekeeping item because office is an outright permitted use in the CI zone. But I think that the applicant really wanted to make sure it was listed specifically in the policy because it is an important use, especially with the university being vacated. I do think they anticipate that office will be a use that will likely occur in some of those now vacant buildings. But it is outright permitted already in the CI zone, so this is more of a housekeeping amendment to add that to the policy as well. With regard to subarea 1A, the standard limiting uses to a major building and no more than 2 buildings in this subarea is found in Appendix F of the Community Development Code. And since multifamily use would be exempt from Appendix F, then that standard would not technically apply to multifamily. And so in order to assure that multifamily would also comply with this standard, the proposal is to bring that forward as a CDC code, a new code standard that would apply to multifamily, that would require any new multifamily to be limited to a major building or no more than 2 buildings. As I indicated before, this sub-area is quite narrow, and it's probably unlikely that they would ever put multifamily in there. But we do want the code standard there just in case it ever came up, so that it would have the same restriction as other development in the Marylhurst district. And getting down to the last two here, another key policy is the transportation planning rule. And the state transportation planning rule basically requires that any code amendments must either have no significant effect, which is defined in that statute, or that OAR, on the transportation system, or if there is a significant effect, the proposed land use to be allowed must be consistent with the identified function, capacity, and performance standard of the transportation facility. The transportation planning rule implements statewide planning goal 12, which is transportation, and it requires, which is to provide and encourage a safe, convenient, and economic transportation system. As discussed previously, the proposed trip cap would limit the combination of uses on the site to generate no more AM and PM peak hour trips than the prior university. In your packet that you received, there is, I believe it's Exhibit F4, a letter from ODOT. They reviewed the applicant's traffic memo, and they actually concur with the applicant's findings that there will not be a significant effect on the state highway, provided the amendments establish a trip cap that would limit existing and future site development on the property as proposed. The city traffic engineer also reviewed the traffic memo and concurs with the applicant's findings as well. And then lastly, another key policy is the Oregon statewide planning goal 10. And this ensures the opportunity for the provision of adequate number of needed housing units, also the efficient use of buildable land within urban growth boundaries, and to provide greater certainty in the development process so as to reduce housing costs. As discussed previously, the Lake Oswego buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis was done in 2013, and it was adopted as an appendix to the Lake Oswego comp plan in 2014. And the buildable lands inventory looked at the residentially zoned land within the LO urban services boundary. The CI zoned and its land area were not actually included as residentially zoned land, therefore allowing for the opportunity of multifamily housing on parts of the CI zone doesn't affect the availability of residentially zoned land to meet Lake Oswego's housing needs. The addition of multifamily housing opportunities in the CI zone will meet a part of the higher needed type of housing units, though, per the buildable land inventory and housing needs analysis, but it does not displace the ability of other lands on which the buildable land inventories was based to meet the city's housing needs. So it's kind of an extra, it's like a bonus, you know, it wasn't included in the prior buildable lands inventory, but it still will go towards meeting our housing needs for the future. So with that, again, I just wanted to cover certain key policies. Staff is recommending approval of the CDC and comprehensive plan amendments, specifically with these additional standards, adding a standard for subareas 1 and 1A, limiting the combined uses to those that collectively generate 327 or fewer trips during the AM weekday peak hour and 351 or fewer trips during the weekday PM peak hour. And this would be a code standard that would be a site-specific standard in the CDC. It would also add a clear and objective, or staff also recommends adding an additional clear and objective standard for residential development that requires a minimum setback from any abutting residentially zoned lot, including lots not in the city, that is equal to the height of the proposed residential building. And then finally, add a standard to the CI zone to require residential uses in subarea 1A to be located in a major building and no more than 2 buildings. All of the code amendments proposed are found in attachment B to Exhibit A1. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Leonard and Manu. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure. Commissioner Beckett, go ahead.
The what portion of the dwellings in the two buildings that are to be built will be affordable housing? That's one of the objectives that the city is working on. And this looks like a great opportunity. In your remarks, I gathered that it was only a portion of it that would be considered affordable. Can it be said that the entire project would be all affordable housing?
Well, we wanted to have a specific standard or minimum that would require a certain number of units. As proposed right now, we're not requiring them to provide 100% of the units. It may be their intention to do that, and that's a good question for the applicant when they provide their testimony. But what our standard says is that we're using the same standard that's in, let me see, I'm sorry. A multifamily development of 20 or more units where at least 10% of the units are continuously rented, leased, or made available for an amount of rent plus expenses associated with the occupancy, such that utilities fees totaling not more than 30% of the income level that is 80% of the area median income. So it is just a portion. It's only 10% that's required, but the applicant can certainly provide more, and that may be the intent of the sisters to do so.
Well, part of the assertion is that there are 400 employees in the Mary's Woods subdivision right next door to it, and that this would be an ideal place for many of those employees to relocate to. That minimizes the number of trip caps and so on, but I would expect that the types of employees that we're talking about would need fairly affordable housing.
Yeah, and again, the sisters may be able to elaborate on whether they intend to provide more than the minimum, but we decided to go with what was established already in the code in terms of our affordability requirements, just to be consistent. So it is only requiring not a portion of it be affordable, not the entire project.
But they could do it for the entire project if they choose to.
They certainly could.
Vice Chair Pepe, you had a question?
Yes, first, great presentation. How do they go about guaranteeing a trip cap?
So at every time that there's a development application or a new use, they're going to have to show that the proposed use plus all the existing uses on the site do not exceed the trip cap for the AM and PM peak hour. So it will require an analysis for basically every use every time they change use on the site. So the sisters or the owners or whoever's operating it will need to stay on top of that. And if they go above it, it would be an enforcement issue.
What is that enforcement?
Well, if we would require them to do the analysis, and if they were over, there's a variety of options that we could choose from. There's fines until they comply, or they can vacate a use. They're not easy options, but they are options for us to gain compliance.
Commissioner Pape, before we would even get to that point, we would have an accounting of the uses on the property in the same way that we account for parking. We have a parking matrix for every commercial center. In this case, because it's a campus, we would have a trip, an accounting of trips on the property. And so before we would even get, or the sisters would get into a situation where they were exceeding that, just as Jessica was saying, or Senior Planner Namatoglu was saying, when there's a change of use, that if it triggers development review, that's obviously a place where we would review that. If it's not a development that triggers development review is just a new tenant moving in or moving out. With the tenant moving in, it's just like anyone moving into a shopping center. They need to get a business license, and hopefully they've talked with the property owner, the landlord, about availability of parking, and they've talked to the city about the city's parking requirements in the same way, the trip budget for this site would operate. And so, we would advise, we would support, we would assist and say, looks like you're getting close to your trip cap. Let's, talk about new uses that are wanting to locate there. There is a way to manage it without it becoming an enforcement issue if everyone's communicating.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, just, is it Marylhurst's intention to give their employees preference?
I don't know. That's a good question for the applicant when they make their presentation. I can tell you it is not a code requirement as the code amendments are written. It's not a code requirement for them to give preference, but certainly the sisters could choose to do that.
Well, and their Fair Housing Act requirements, they can speak to that. I think Attorney Boone can speak to that later too if you have more questions.
Because what I'm concerned with is, on the one hand, it looks good for LO to say we have more middle housing, but on the other hand, if it's restricted to Marylhurst employees, really the general LO population doesn't have a chance to partake of that. So that concerns me a little bit.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Stewart, you had a question? Commissioner Stewart, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Sorry, Commissioner Stewart. Yeah, we can't hear you.
How about that?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, Commissioner
Yeah,
Stewart.
again, I apologize. I'm having trouble with my connection a little bit throughout this meeting. So my clarification question was, so PM trip counts 351 and AM trip counts 327. Is that intended to be to be applied only to the 1 and 1A sections, or is that for the entire Marylhurst, including Mary's Woods?
Only subareas 1 and 1A.
Okay. And would my other question is would you happen to know, or maybe this is a question for the applicant, what percentage of the buildings on the subsections 1 and 1A are currently in use?
I do not know the answer to that. I apologize. The
Okay.
applicant may be able to give you that.
I might ask it again later. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Commissioners, any other questions? Or we'll open it for public testimony. I don't see any other commissioners.
There's a or applicant's presentation.
Oh, okay. Attorney Boone, is there anything that you want to say, or is it? Can we go into the applicant's presentation?
Well, yes, we would take the applicant's presentation up to 20 minutes. Can you hear me? Yeah. And then people testifying in favor of the application, testifying opposed, and then neither for nor against. Now, I will track the time, but since you can't see my clock normally, I will interrupt and say there's 1 minute left. Okay?
Thank you, Attorney Boone. So now we'd like to take the applicant's presentation.
I understand that the first speaker is going to be Maureen Delaney.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Sister Maureen Delaney. I'm the province leader of the Sisters of the Holy Names. And on behalf of all the sisters, I'm very pleased that we will be sharing with you this evening our plans to join with Mercy Housing so that we will hopefully be able to bring affordable workforce housing to our Marylhurst Commons campus. We want to thank you, the members of the Planning Commission, for your interest in our project. And we want to thank the Planning Commission staff for all of your time and energy you gave to us to help us prepare for this hearing. And now I'm going to turn this over to Sister Mary Rita, who will tell you about how this project came to be.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm pleased to be able to give you some background regarding the Sisters of the Holy Name's desire to have affordable workforce housing on the former Marylhurst University campus, which we have renamed Marylhurst Commons. After Marylhurst University closed 2 years ago, ownership of the campus reverted to the Society of the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. We sisters on our leadership team began a process of determining what we would do with this beautiful campus. We hired JLA to facilitate a process to gather input from a variety of groups, which led us to deciding to apply to the city to include multifamily housing as a permitted use. We have engaged the Booking Group to help with our application to the city and hired Kittleson Associates to do the required traffic study. I would like to share with you how and why we came to the decision to seek to have affordable workforce housing at Marylhurst Commons. At the beginning of our process to gather input, we listed the values on which we would base our decisions. These are the core values guided by our decision. Service to others, particularly those who are underserved or marginalized. In the last 5 decades, as education has become more available, we sisters began offering other services that were going unmet. Next, commitment to Christian social justice principles. We sisters have always been concerned and involved with people who have been marginalized and discriminated against for a variety of reasons. We feel compelled to work for equity, equality, and inclusion. Hospitality. From our founding until now, welcoming whomever comes our way has been important to us. Now more than ever, we see the need to be hospitable to all persons. Dedication to the full development of human persons. In our schools, we try to provide more than reading and writing, such as art and music education, athletics, counseling, etc. Lastly, collaboration with partners committed to similar values. As our number of sisters have dwindled, we have realized the value of collaborating with other agencies and people. Next, we determined the criteria to guide us in our process and decisions regarding the use of the property. Maintain ownership of the property and our tax exempt status. We did not want to sell the property to a developer. Doing so would have increased our financial resources, but we want the property to be used to meet an unmet need. Manage the land in an environmentally sensitive manner. Our goal is to eventually be at net zero use of fossil fuel energy. Other than the hoped for affordable housing, we have no intention of constructing any other buildings. Next, work collaboratively with nonprofit agencies to provide specific needed services. We sisters have neither the human nor fiscal resources to start a new ministry on campus. So whatever we do will be in a collaborative effort. Base choices and decisions on available financial resources. We will not risk going into debt. Assure that the projects located on the property can collectively cover costs of the campus operation. While we do not expect to make any money from the property, we also do not want to lose any money needed for the care of our sisters. Our vision for this property is to maintain much of the open space, preserve the 5 historical buildings, be sustainable environmentally and fiscally, and respond to some unmet need in the local area. To share our values and seek input on ways the campus could be of service, we met with our sisters in Oregon and with 5 focus groups, including Marys Woods administrators and some resident council members, youth villages, Sisters of the Holy Names lay associates, former Marylhurst University staff, and alumni. We held 2 larger sessions for Marys Woods residents and for neighborhood associations. We also met with a few specific entities because we thought they would know of the greatest unmet needs in the greater Portland area. These included a few foundations, housing organizations such as Catholic Charities, and community groups. We did a lot of listening and answering of questions. With the input received and analyzed, we realized that the need for housing was mentioned in one way or another by every group with which we met. In an online survey of hourly workers at Marys Woods, we learned that 54 workers were interested in living on campus. We have no preference for Marys Woods workers. We assume there are hundreds of other workers in Lake Oswego who cannot afford to live in the city. So they are traveling distances every day just to get to work and back home. As you know, it is difficult to find affordable housing in Lake Oswego. We are grateful that the Lake Oswego City Council recognizes the need for affordable housing. We have asked Mercy Housing Northwest to collaborate with us to determine if it might be possible for them to establish an affordable housing community toward the back of our campus. The area under consideration is roughly within the circle shown on this map. If the rezone for multifamily housing is approved by the city, we will remove the 3 older dorms at the back of the campus, thus making room for affordable workforce housing without using much open space at all. We are familiar with Mercy Housing Northwest because of their excellent reputation of providing affordable housing communities in Washington state. They do not just build the housing, get residents, hire a manager, and leave. Mercy Housing Northwest provides a variety of services for their residents, which their president will explain shortly. Mercy Housing is in the process of conducting a feasibility study to determine if building and maintaining an affordable housing community at Marylhurst Commons is possible for them. As part of that process, we asked the city of Lake Oswego to rezone our campus to include multifamily housing. This step with the city is about rezoning land use, not about the design and construction of the homes. We are using the term affordable workforce housing because we desire to provide housing for people working in our Lake Oswego area who cannot afford to rent or buy here. This housing will be open to other workers in the area, not just Marys Woods workers. The number of units under consideration is 75 to 100. Somewhere out in cyberspace, the false rumor is circulating that we plan to build 300 to 600 units. That is categorically not true. The most units under consideration is 100. What about the rest of campus? If you have visited the campus, you have noticed that we are renovating the former faculty house called Villa Maria to provide space for 4 to 7 sisters to live, and which will provide 17 guest rooms for hospitality when we have meetings with our sisters from outside of this area. What else? In our focus groups, we heard a lot of ideas about how to use the campus. Many of the suggestions were in the broad area of education, some regarding the arts and performance possibilities. Currently, we are leasing buildings to a few nonprofit agencies, which we will continue to do. We still have space to lease and will continue to look for nonprofits whose values and activities are congruent with our values and would be compatible with an affordable workforce housing community. Now, I would like to hand over our time to Joe Thompson, who is the president of Mercy Housing Northwest. Joe?
Good evening. I'm Joe Thompson, and as Sister Mary Rita said, I am the president of Mercy Housing Northwest. And I'd first off like to thank Sister Mary Rita and the rest of the SNJM leadership team. And many thanks to each of you as well, the Planning Commission, for allowing us to present to you this evening. We're very grateful for this opportunity. So Mercy Housing Northwest is excited and honored to be working with the sisters to explore the potential for affordable multifamily housing on the Marylhurst campus. Mercy has a long history with the sisters. They were one of our founding communities 25 years ago and continue to serve on our board of directors to this day. A little bit about Mercy Housing. Mercy Housing Northwest is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that develops and owns affordable housing. We serve over 5,500 residents in 52 residential communities in the Northwest. We are a long-term owner, and we operate our own property management and on-site services, meaning that once we develop housing, we stay involved long-term through the operations of that project. Most of the people we house in our communities are families. We believe that all families should have the opportunity to raise their children in safe, nurturing environments. In turn, most of our family housing is what we call affordable workforce housing. So what exactly does that mean? The way our housing works is that because of our funding, to qualify for it, households must earn no more than a given percentage of the median income for a particular area. In Clackamas County, currently that income range is between $28,000 to $55,000 a year for a family of four. That's roughly 30 to 60% of the area median income. And we will do extensive outreach to many of the local employers. Mary's Woods is an example, to encourage their employees to apply. Something that sets Mercy Housing apart is our resident services. So a stable, affordable home is one of the things that creates healthy families and allows children to thrive. A core part of that Mercy Housing approach that makes us really different than other affordable housing providers is what we call resident services. Resident services are programs that are focused on helping residents achieve success in a variety of aspects of their lives, such as education and health and wellness. We're still in the very early feasibility and planning phase of this project, so we don't have a specific design or program yet. There will be a design review later that goes more in depth on building design, parking, and other areas that I know are important to the larger community. So while we don't have answers to all these questions yet, I would like to speak to our overarching priorities for this project. As Sister Mary Rita said, we're looking at multifamily housing that would include 75 to 100 apartments with a focus on larger apartments with 2 and 3 bedrooms for families. We would also like to include areas for families and children to gather, such as community rooms, play areas, and also areas where they can access the programming I referenced earlier. We take environmental sustainability seriously, and we see ourselves as a steward of the environment. Our buildings are designed to be as environmentally friendly as possible, particularly in their integration with the natural landscape. Campus fit is very important to us, so we will focus on a design that blends well with the rest of the campus buildings and seeks to maintain the open spaces currently on the campus. A project that complements the larger neighborhood is also important to us. Therefore, maintaining the tree corridor between the project and our neighbors is an important goal for us. To help us in these early efforts, we have engaged Carlton Hart Architecture. an experienced firm with a large portfolio of high-quality buildings and communities. We are extremely excited about the opportunity to create beautiful, nurturing, and sustainable homes for families in Lake Oswego, and look forward to sharing more with you as this project progresses. Thank you.
Hello, and thanks for being with us tonight. My name is Debbie Cleek, and I'm with the Bookin Group. I'm the land use planner that prepared the application for the sisters, and I just will speak very briefly. I really want to thank our planner, Jessica, who did a great job of talking about some of the big issues that I think will come up in the public testimony. What I wanted to say really quickly is that one of the reasons, why we set these amendments up the way we did is we were really trying to create like a very precise code change to the community development code that addressed the immediate need of providing housing without creating overarching consequences or far-reaching requirements that would have down the line run into other problems. So what we've done is the code amendment would expand the uses permitted on the site without stepping up the intensity of development. And at the same time, it maintains the CI zoning on the site, which was originally created specifically for the Marylhurst campus. And so it addresses already the historical character, the existing natural resources, the surrounding single-family development, and the campus-like character. So we really tried to do as much as we could with this amendment to make sure that we were maintaining the campus in the form that it in its existing form. Really quickly, I want to touch on sections or sub area 1A, which we included in the proposal, and I think Jessica did a great job of explaining why by showing the zoning map and how the zoning on the site is laid out. And we had specifically just addressed all of the areas that were previously the university and were are zoned CI. So there's not any proposal right now to develop anything in sub area 1A. It's currently a stream corridor that has a protective overlay on it and a historic landmark building that is used by the sisters as their administrative offices. So not only is it not practical to develop in area sub 1A, it's also not feasible due to all of the development restrictions. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that there's nothing proposed in sub area 1A, and it's sort of just got swept up into the proposal because the way the code is written and because how the zoning is on the property. If there is a desire to have that better clarified, that no new multifamily housing is going into sub area 1A, we're happy to work with staff on any kind of amendment that would be needed in that direction. But I just wanted to make it clear that it got put in the proposal because of the way the zoning is on the site and not because of the intention to build on that area. I think, again, Jessica did a great job of talking about the trip cap and how the trip cap will work and how it will be maintained and enforced on the site in the future. I did want to say that we have our traffic engineer with Kittleson and Associates here tonight. So if there's any specific traffic questions, Chris is here to address those in greater detail. But essentially the trip cap will work like a bank where each new development will be looked at against how many trips are still available on the site. And as Sister Margarita explained, thank you, there's very little development on the site right now. The affordable housing will use about 56 of the total trips. So they're well below where the university was when it was operating at peak capacity. And there's a lot of flexibility. That was my timer. So there's a lot of flexibility by providing the trip cap, and it will be well below what the university was at peak capacity. So we welcome your questions, and we're happy to answer anything that you might have on our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions you'd like to ask the applicant? Commissioner Stewart?
Yeah, back to the back to trip counts. The applicant had just mentioned just a short time ago that they're allocating approximately 56 trips to this proposed use. Is that number based on what you're projecting the number of unit types or the unit types within the development to be, i.e. you're saying that these are going to be mostly for families? And so, I mean, a project that has primarily family units might generate X amount of trip counts, whereas maybe a project that has 1-bedroom or studio units would generate Y trip counts. Is there a significant difference between the two?
I'm going to let Chris answer that question.
Good evening. My name is Chris Bramer. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Kittleson Associates and the engineer of record for the project. Commissioner Stewart, great question. Those preliminary numbers are just that. It's an estimate based on 100 typical market rate apartment units. The national average trip rates don't differentiate between number of bedrooms in the units. And I think it was really for illustrative purposes. When there is a site-specific development plan, we'll work with the city traffic engineering staff to look at what's the most appropriate rate to apply at that time. But in general, it was really just intended to be a representative estimate of what could happen. There may be an opportunity, depending on the final both number of units as well as what the resident population is, to further refine that. The number we gave was based on typical market rate housing as opposed to affordable rate housing, simply because historically there hasn't been much affordable rate housing data available.
But I guess the question is when you go and refine that rate, would you expect it to change much based on, increasing the number of 3-bedroom units versus the number of 1-bedroom units, or do you think the change would not be that significant?
At this point, I don't expect the change would be that significant.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, other questions?
Oh,
Commissioner Stewart, go ahead.
Sorry, I had the one more. So the one that I asked earlier, would any member of the applicant team know approximately what percentage of the current campus buildings are in use, like in terms of like area, like how many of them are being used currently as office or otherwise?
As office. Our CFO, Vicki Cummings, can respond to that.
Hi, I'm Vicki Cummings. I'm the CFO for the Sisters. I would say at the present time, no more than 15% of the square footage is being used. In fact, it's probably even less than that. The buildings are basically empty.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sumler?
I had a question. The existing dormitories that will be essentially raised to build a new multifamily building, how many units does the current dormitory have? And is there a reason to demo versus try and retrofit it to accommodate people and families?
I can give it a try on that one. So I believe when they were being used for dormitories, and Vicki, if I'm wrong about this, I believe it housed 80 students. I might be a little low on that number. But my understanding is the existing buildings have just run out their useful life. They were built with a construction style that's no longer easy. It cannot easily be retrofit. I believe there might be asbestos in the buildings. And so I think for the most part, it's just they're set up as dorms. They're not useful. They can't be easily retrofitted. And so at the end of the day, it's just actually much more inexpensive to demolish them. Did I get all that right, Vicki?
I can add to that real quickly, Debbie. This is Brian Carlton with Carlton Hart Architecture, and we actually did a quick analysis with Walsh Construction, a general contractor, to evaluate the potential for repurposing those buildings, and found them to not be appropriate for family housing, and the cost to renovate was not feasible.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Attorney Boone, go ahead.
Well, the focus of the Planning Commission is whether to add as an authorized use multifamily housing. We're not deciding whether or not they need to tear down any dormitories in order to have that at this juncture. If and when development occurs, the applicant's going to have to basically take away vested rights, dormitories, in order to provide for additional use under the trip cap, under traffic, under utilities, and that sort of thing. And that's all in the development stage. So we don't need, I'm just trying to refresh to the commission here. We don't need to determine, how many dormitories are going to move away and how many multifamily units are going to come in. That gets balanced in the development side. The only question is whether or not that should be an authorized permitted use under a trip, with a general trip cap on the property.
Thank you, Attorney Boone. Vice Chair Pape.
How much of the land that's being requested to be rezoned, how much of the land would not be redeveloped? I guess maybe otherwise, but how much additional excess land would there be for potential future development?
So the vast majority of the campus would not be redeveloped. The Sisters plan does not include demolishing any of the other buildings on the site right now, 5 of which are historic landmarks, so they're very difficult to remove to begin with. And the rest of them are viable buildings, and so sort of the vision of the campus is to pivot away from educational uses and more towards community service related uses, similar to what Sister Mary Rita talked about, that might involve, community space for meetings, performances, art, as well as lots of offices for nonprofits whose missions sort of line up with the mission of the Sisters. So there's a lot of campus that is not intended to be touched at all. Does that answer your question, or is there something more? I don't know that we can break it down into percentages.
No, I think you answered, I think you pretty well touched on it. My concern just was of what was being requested to be rezoned. How much of that would not be actually developed?
The entire site, I believe, is 50 acres. Do I have that right? I would have to look it up again. 50 acres. And I would hazard to guess that the area where the multifamily housing is going would be not more than 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Sumler?
I guess my next question, if multifamily is allowed on the site and there's an influx of families with children, is the local school district, the local school, elementary, middle, and high school able to accommodate the influx of children attending the school? Has that been studied or looked at?
I did look at that as part of our report that we submitted as part of our application. I can't say I did extensive research, but I did did a Google search of all of the school districts that the site would feed into, and all of them indicated that they had capacity in their schools for more students. I don't know if the city's done more research than that, but it definitely did indicate that there was capacity in all the schools in Lake Oswego.
Yeah, I might add, just responding for staff, that school capacity is not a criterion, actually, unless you're in a district that's designated as a high growth district, and then there's some facility planning and coordination requirements under state law. We're not in that position, and we actually have elementary schools that, as you may recall, that are not being used today, and where students have been redistributed to other elementary schools. So again, it's not an applicable criterion for the zone change. Just on a qualitative level, it's not something that was really a concern from staff's perspective.
Thank you, Director
Thanks.
Steele. Commissioner Stewart, did you have a question?
I do have one last question, and I apologize if this gets into the weeds a little bit, but this is going to help me sort of think about the setback discussion that was raised earlier. Does anyone on the applicant team know the approximate size of the footprint of the 3 existing dormitories that are going to be demolished?
I don't know the footprint, but I believe the 3 buildings combined are about 38,000 square feet. I can look it up really quick.
Okay, so that would include the upper floors?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, are they they're 2-story buildings, right? Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. So I can look that up if you want, because I'm positive it's in my report, but I believe that's how big they are.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Commissioners, any other final questions? I see none. Attorney Boone, can we move for public testimony, or what's the process for the next step?
Yes, we go ahead and ask if there's any persons online who are testifying in favor of the application. And again, if you wish to testify, and this is the last time I announce it, 503-635-0286 or KKLUGE, Cat Kluge, at lakeoswego.city. And again, I will just make an audio reminder that there's 1 minute left in the testimony.
Thank you, Attorney Boone. So this time we'll be calling people who wish to give testimonies in favor. Jean, would you like to announce the first person?
Yes, Glenda Anderson has asked to testify.
Thank you, Jean. Glenda Anderson, would you please state your name and address for the record? Ms. Anderson, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Glenda Anderson. I live at Marys Woods. My address is 17440 Holy Names Drive, Unit 412, Lake Oswego, 97304. I just want to, as a next door neighbor to the Marylhurst campus and community, I just want to lend my support to this zoning change. I think to allow affordable multi-family dwellings on the Marylhurst community will be a huge gift to the community. And I think the Sisters of the Holy Names will do it in such a way that it will respect all of the issues that they mentioned. So I just want to lend my support. Thank you.
Thank you for giving your testimony tonight. Jean, could we call the next person?
That would be Carol Anderson.
Carol Anderson, would you like to state your name and address for the record?
Yes, Carol Anderson, 2802 Rosecliff Drive in Lake Oswego, and that's in Marys Woods. It's one of the villas in Marys Woods. My husband and I moved into that villa about the time that Marylhurst was closing, which was, we were real sad to see that happen. And we wondered what the future property use might be. When it was announced that a portion of the campus would be used for affordable housing, and that was going to happen under the Mercy Corporation, the as you might expect, the residents had some reservations about that. So Dave and I have a daughter in Oakland, California, who has a degree in public policy and had worked for the Corporation for Supportive Housing. So we called her to see what she knew about Mercy, and she said it had a very good reputation, though she had not worked directly with them. She encouraged us to call one of her colleagues who served on the Mercy Board California, or who was on the board for the Mercy California Housing. And she had a lot of good things to say about it. You know, she indicated the same things that have been indicated by most of you about how involved the people who run the organization are with the people who live there, and that they provide property managers, they have services for childcare and after-school programs, and community gatherings, playgrounds, that kind of thing. And Dave and I, my husband and I, feel that all families and children should have the opportunity to live in a healthy and safe environment and have the advantages of good education. And that's, I think, is probably what will happen with this particular development. Over the weekend, I spent some time looking on the website of the mercyhousing.org, and I was impressed. It provided information about the small beginnings of the program with a sister in Nebraska, as well as understanding how much support is given to the individuals who live in that housing. As I understand it, this is one of the first affordable housing units to be built in Lake Oswego. And the first time that Mercy has been involved in the state of Oregon.
You know what you're saying? Not really. I mean, I've written down a few things, but.
Oh, excuse me, Ms. Anderson. Point of order here. If you're not speaking, please go on mute. I think Mr. Tom Fink, we're actually getting some background noise. If you could please mute. Thank you.
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
Ms. Anderson, go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, just looking to the future, you know, there's a lot of education expertise and talent here with the Mary's Woods residents. And it might be an avenue where some of us could share with the residents of the families living in affordable housing in some fashion. So I just see it as a real positive step moving forward, and would encourage that, yeah, that it be pursued. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Mhm.
Commissioners, any questions? Let's see any. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Tom Fink?
Mr. Fink, would you like to state your name and address for the record?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'll apologize for interrupting Carol. I'm sorry. But my name is Tom Fink. My residence address is 5988 Claremont Court, Lake Oswego, and I've lived there for the past, I don't know, it's 29 or 30 years.
Thank you. If you'd like to go ahead and give your comments, your testimony tonight.
Okay. We've had about a 55, my wife has had a 55-year relationship with the Sisters of the Holy Names. First of all, attending their high school in Medford, and then graduating from Marylhurst University about 50 years ago. And then our three daughters graduated from St. Mary's Academy in downtown Portland. So we've had a long-term relationship with the sisters. And if there is anyone on this planet that cares more about other people, I'm not sure who would rank above the Sisters of the Holy Names. They have always put the students, their community, above any other interests, and therefore, I would think that this project this zoning, excuse me, should be allowed for them. I am in no way a expert on affordable housing, but I did spend about 10 years every Sunday night in a shelter run by our parish. And people that need affordable housing are in no way, shape, or form bad people. They just need a break, okay? And in this country right now, whether it be Lake Oswego, the state of Oregon, or United States, we most definitely need affordable housing so that we can get our people taken care of. The relationship that we have had with the sisters, I mean, you know, they could sell this property to a developer and you know, come away with an extra dollar in their pocket. They're really more concerned about people and how they can help those that maybe have not been as lucky as probably most of us. So if there's any way that we can get this approved with this zoning change, I would be very much in support of that.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Fink? I see none. All right, thank you, Mr. Fink. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Yes, Victoria Force.
Ms. Force, would you like to state your name and address for the record and then give your testimony? Is Ms. Force on, Jean? Do we see her? I don't.
Oh, am I on?
Oh, yes, we can hear you
Okay.
now. If you
Yes,
state your name and
okay.
address and then give testimony. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Victoria Force, and I live at 2541 155th Place Southeast in Bellevue, Washington, 98007. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight and allowing for us to come and speak to the zone change on the former Marylhurst campus property. I appreciate your time and your effort, and I'm here to speak to you in favor of the zoning change of the Marylhurst Commons land and in favor of the proposed projects planned with the approval of this change. My name is Tori, and I am a Marylhurst University and alumni class of 2016. I was very involved during my time at Marylhurst. In addition to classes, I worked on campus, and I was part of the student government, eventually progressing to being the head of the Student Leadership Council in my final year there. I attended many events with the sisters and interacted with the sisters still working at the university often. At the end of my time there, I was invited to speak at my commencement ceremony. In my 2016 commencement speech, I spoke about how the elements of Marylhurst and all that we gained there were now within us, and we now must carry them with us as we embark out into the world with our newly awarded degrees. Little did I know that my words would mean something completely different 2 years later, as Marylhurst's permanent closure was announced. We are now the sole carriers of Marylhurst's legacy, along with the Sisters of the Holy Names. Marylhurst was always a place of community, purpose, service, and peace. And the Sisters of the Holy Names have always been about focused on service, opportunity, growth, and community. Creating the pathways for Mercy Housing to be able to build an additional community through affordable housing is in direct alignment of both of those missions of the sisters and the university. Lake Oswego has a notable lack of affordable housing for families, students, and individuals working in town. It was difficult for me to afford to live close to campus in my time there. Mercy Housing could fill that need of affordable places to live for Lake Oswego employees, as well as become a community of support and comfort for those in need. This will also serve the neighboring towns of Westland and Oregon City. As a former Lake Oswego employee, Westland resident, Marylhurst alumni, and a current mental health therapist to low-income families, I have a unique perspective on the many sides of this situation, and I see this move forward as the most beneficial for all involved. Marylhurst was a place in which I found myself and I found my fellow dreamers. This is true for many Marylhurst alumni. Marylhurst was a place that we found a home, a comfort, a purpose. The announcement of the school's closure in 2018 broke many hearts because of the fear that the peace and comfort that Marylhurst offers would end. We are what is left of Marylhurst, our experiences, our lives, our passions, and our service. It is time for a new community of people to experience the beauty and comfort that we have all had at Marylhurst. Rezoning this land is the first step in creating a continued legacy for the Sisters of the Holy Names, Marylhurst University, and all who have passed through. I believe this future for Marylhurst Commons is the right future. Thank you for hearing us tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Force. Commissioners, any questions from Ms. Force? I see none. Thank you, Ms. Force. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Nicole John.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, if you just state your name and address for the record and go ahead and give your testimony.
My name's Nicole Diamond John. I live on 201 Evergreen Road, Lake Oswego. I am a commercial real estate broker with Capacity Commercial Group, and I'm actually working on the retail leasing at Mary's Woods. And I've been a part of helping in that Mary's Woods last phase of development for the past several years. I grew up in Lake Oswego, actually across the street in the Marylhurst neighborhood, and I moved back to Lake Oswego several years ago. I'm speaking today to support the amendment, the current zoning code, to allow for affordable multifamily housing, which I believe would ease the shortage of housing for those in need. With the potential projects that the sisters have approached, they have always taken care to align with their long-term vision for the campus and its connection to the surrounding community. Education and care have always remained at the forefront of their mission. This project would provide the opportunity for affordable housing for those who worked at Mary's Woods and around Mary's Woods and the greater Lake Oswego community. With 400 people working at Mary's Woods, it may actually have a positive impact on the lessen traffic on the busy Highway 43. And I believe that it would also impact the quality of life for those at Mary's Woods and people living in the affordable housing in the community to provide opportunities for intergenerational living. I also believe that there could be a lot of great opportunities to unfold and develop and enhance community connection by what other opportunities could develop. And I think it would also enliven that retail aspect that we have at Mary's Woods as well. I think the goal for the potential project is to simply provide much needed affordable housing, and by replacing the older rundown buildings, I see this as a very positive improvement, which is why I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? None? All right, thank you. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Walter Knapp.
Mr. Knapp, would you like to state your name and address for the record and then give testimony?
Hi, I'm Walt Knapp. I live in Mary's Woods. I live on Menard Street and been here about 1.5 years. And I fully support the affordable workforce housing proposal. Marylhurst Commons, as we're now calling it. And I think the main thing is there is such an apparent need for affordable workforce housing for people who work in Lake Oswego and even in West Lynn. And the sisters have done, I think, an excellent job in teaming, or at least in preliminary fashion, with Mercy Housing Northwest, which has a tremendous track record and mission. So I will actually state my support is based on some assumptions that I've made based on what the sisters have said. And that is that the development is focused on a limited portion of the eastern part of the campus, sort of the downhill part of the campus. And their objective, in addition to their own mission, is to continue to preserve the historic resources of the property and to maintain the remainder of the 40-acre campus for nonprofit uses and open spaces. And I'm quoting from some of the information they provided and also some of the presentations that they've made. And it's a really compelling argument for development of this wonderful workforce housing. And I think the emphasis on workforce housing is very important. So in my opinion, this is a win-win situation and I fully support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Knapp? None? Thank you. Jean, would you please call the next person?
Mary O'Reilly.
Ms. O'Reilly, would you please state your name and address for the record? Ms. O'Reilly, if you're on, we can't hear you. I believe you might be on mute. Jean, just to check, I don't see Miss O'Reilly. Is she on?
I noticed her before about 5 minutes ago, but not now.
Okay. Maybe we can come back and check if Miss O'Reilly rejoins.
Yeah, we seem to have lost her from the roster. Okay, the next person would be, let's see here, Mary Ann Stolwell.
Ms. Stolwell, would you like to state your name and address for the record and give testimony?
I'm Mary Ann Stoll, and the address is 17480 Holy Names Drive, Unit 104. Zip is 97034. I'm a fifth-generation Oregonian, graduate of Marylhurst College, and a resident of Mary's Woods. And I support the request for a zoning change for Marylhurst Commons property to allow development of a multi-family housing. The approval of this request for a joint zoning change will increase much needed opportunities for housing for families and individuals who are part of the workforce of people employed in or near Lake Oswego. Just as important, it would be a demonstration of the desire of the citizens of Lake Oswego to move toward greater inclusivity and diversity. The 115-year history of the Sisters of Holy Names has proven their commitment to the needs of Oregonians and their willingness as a community to do the hard work that responsible civic involvement requires. This was amply demonstrated in the way in which they worked with the city of Lake Oswego in the process of building Mary's Woods. This is a group of women who can be counted on to proceed with caution, complete the tasks they commit to, conduct their work openly and fairly, and always keeping in mind the good of their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stoll. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Stoll? None? Thank you. I see Ms. O'Reilly has joined us again. Jean, any issues? Can we take Ms. O'Reilly next?
Yes.
Yeah. Ms. O'Reilly, if you'd like to state your name and address for the record and give testimony.
Thank you. I keep losing my internet connection, so I'm coming and going here. But
No problem.
my name is Mary O'Reilly, and I'm a resident of Mary's Woods. I live at 17480 Holy Names Drive, Unit 319, Lake Oswego 97034. I'd like to speak tonight in support of the request of the Sisters of the Holy Names to amend the Lake Oswego Community Development Code in order to add affordable multifamily housing to the Marylhurst property. Affordable housing is a pressing need in our Lake Oswego community. The availability of this multifamily workforce housing would be a great benefit to many who live and work in Lake Oswego. A large number of our staff members at Mary's Woods travel many miles to work every day. Many of them would be happy to live within walking distance of their jobs, and this would thereby cut down on some of the traffic on Highway 43. I am sure many other people who work in businesses, restaurants, and markets in Lake Oswego would also be happy to live closer to their places of employment. One of the goals of the Holy Name Sisters is to meet the needs in their local community. And the ability to provide this multi-family housing on the Marylhurst property is a win-win situation for the Holy Name Sisters and for the whole community of Lake Oswego. So I ask you to vote in support of this request. I also was very familiar with Mercy Housing in California, and I also say that it's a wonderful, wonderful idea and a group to come in there. But I just urge you to vote yes in support of this rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Reilly. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. O'Reilly? None? All right, thank you. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Andrew Groves.
Andrew, if you'd like to state your name and address for the record and give testimony.
Yes, hello, my name is Andrew Grover. 2507 Christie Drive, that's Lake Oswego. And I am here, I'm the director, the executive director of Youth Villages. We own approximately 10 acres on the northeast corner of what is the full Marylhurst campus. It's our own property, so it didn't show up on some of the maps that you saw earlier, but if you look more broadly, you'll see us there. I've had the good fortune of working with the sisters for over 15 years, and I'm here to testify in support of this proposal. The sisters, based on a couple of things, the sisters live their values. I think that's been discussed here by several people, but what they say they're going to do, that's what they're going to do. And so I think we can all count on that. It's been really well documented that affordable housing is a need in this area. Going to your own 2013 housing analysis and all the observations that other people have made here, that's an important factor in all of this. But also the high quality of previous developments that they've been involved in. You know, I honestly, I feel like I'd be lucky to be able to live in a space that the sisters, you know, thought about, developed, and put forward to the community. So I believe it's consistent with community standards. I know that they will respect the natural beauty of that site and the surrounding area. And so, you know, for those reasons, I would urge your support of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Grover. Commissioners, any other questions? Mr. Grover? None? All right, thank you. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
I believe we've gone through those who have indicated they are in favor. So we would be starting on those who are opposed, I understand.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Would you like to call the first person who would like to give testimony in opposition?
Yes, I think she's coming in. Her name is Yvonne Campbell. Yvonne Campbell? Yvonne Campbell? She doesn't have a microphone here, just a... we'll go on to, let's see, Carolyn Jones.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, if you please state your name and address for the record and give testimony.
My name is Carolyn Jones, 2818 Poplar Way in Glen Maury. I'm the closest neighbor to the north of the campus, not the entire property. And I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s, I had my first encounter with the sisters, and it was quite different than what's been stated here this evening. I walked into the hearing when they wanted to develop the campus, looked at the map, and my property was on the map as an exit. I was able to that off. They hadn't contacted me at all, but I just put it on. I was able to get that off, but then about 3 or 4 years later, I was hit with this was during the savings and loan scam. I was hit with a fraudulent foreclosure. This was well before foreclosures were the in thing there for a while. But I couldn't find out that the attorney that had set that up, it was false. There was this predatory lender. The attorney that had set that up was also doing work for the Christie School. So I think there's some connection there. But as a result, I have tried to keep up with what's going on the campus. I'm the neighborhood liaison for lender. The attorney that had set that up was also doing work for the Christie School. So I think there's some connection there. But as a result,
that's coming through, Yvonne Campbell.
Yeah. Ms. Campbell, could you please go on mute? Point of order. Ms. Campbell, can you please go on mute? Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Jones, you may continue.
Sure. I have been done the preliminary applications for all of the projects on the property except this one. I didn't receive notification for the pre-app. I was just surprised to receive a notice in the mail a few days ago. So there's an anomaly here. I can't understand why I was excluded. But some things that I want to talk about, even in spite of the fact that I've been very knowledgeable about what's going on in the property, I have had no idea that the property is totally tax-free, that they don't pay state taxes, they don't pay taxes to the city. This project will mean no SDC monies from them. They get police and fire services without paying for it. And yet next door, I have a very small house, 1,000 square feet, built in 1961. It does have a little bit of land with it, but I pay just under $5,000 a year. So that's a tremendous, tremendous benefit for the church. And I believe it's a conflict of interest, given that our Constitution guarantees a separation between church and state. Regarding the transportation, I'm not sure that what we're talking about this evening has any influence. I hope it does, but at the higher levels, ODOT and Metro, they see Highway 43 as a kind of a Bancroft freeway for the future to allow all of the development that occurs in Stafford into Lake Oswego and into the Portland area. And so who knows whether these micro decisions will make a difference or not. The notification for this meeting was very strange. If you look at the names on the map, they're all in Westland. And when I initially looked at the list, I saw only one person from Glenmorey. And the reason for that is that the 300 feet distance just didn't cover the people that are relevant. The problem with informing Westland, which I have no problem with, is that that's a different city. They don't have a vote on this really. They can put some public opinion on it, but I feel that the public notification of this is strange. I find it really strange that the Sisters of the Holy Names are moving ahead with it at this time, in fact, given the COVID conditions. I would like to ask Mercy Corporation, has there been any thought to importing people from third world countries over to fill the housing or not?
Well, Ms. Jones, please direct your questions to the commission, not to others in the attendance.
Okay, well, my concern would be that if this becomes a place where third world country inhabitants are imported here for labor purposes, I find that living in a house that is owned by a religion is somewhat of a sharecropping arrangement for the individual. That it can be a benefit, it cannot. I'm kind of out on that particular idea here. I think that the way this is being approached is really odd. I find that, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Commissioners, are there questions for Ms. Jones commissioners would like to ask? I see none. Thank you, Ms. Jones, for your testimony. Jean, it looks like Ms. Campbell has come back.
Yeah,
should we?
it looks like it, huh? Yes,
Yeah.
Yvonne Campbell.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Campbell. Would you please state your name and address for the record, then go ahead and give your testimony?
Yes, my name is Yvonne Campbell. My address is 17555 Gleason Drive, number 312. I'm a brand new resident of Mary's Woods. And I also have a long history with the Sisters of the Holy Names. I'm a graduate of Holy Names University in Oakland, California, sister college. I'm not opposed to the project itself, to the construction of affordable housing. My concern is with the scope of the rezoning proposal, because it essentially rezones every square inch of the Marylhurst campus, which is 50 acres. And I have followed, I've attended the presentations by the sisters, and they have stressed that their intent is to utilize a portion of the property for affordable workforce housing. But it bothers me that the entire campus is being rezoned. The overhead that you saw, or the graphics that you saw, show the approximate area of feasibility study as including the 3 dormitories. And I know that this is rezoning and not for the construction, but the sisters have stressed 75 to 100 units. But the staff report on page 19 says, and I quote, "Staff notes that although the former dormitories are identified as the most likely site for multifamily development, the code amendments do not limit multifamily only to that specific location, and that the use would be permitted in any suitable location in sub-areas 1 and 1A. And sub-areas 1 and 1A cover 50 acres. So this is the part that is of deep concern to me. It's sort of like a trust me kind of situation.
Let me turn this off.
Trust me kind of situation.
Excuse me, Ms. Campbell. Ms. Pritchard, to be receiving some of your audio, if you could please mute. Thank you. Sorry, continue, Ms. Campbell.
So for instance, if the rezoning allows the entire portion to be developed for affordable multi-family housing, and if that were to happen, it really would overwhelm the area, and it would overwhelm the trip cap. So I guess my concern is the extent and scope of this rezoning proposal. And then I also want to, I've learned a great deal by listening to the other commentary, but the other area of concern I have has to do with sub-area 1A, which is that narrow strip that is physically really more located on the Mary's Woods campus, even though technically it's part of the Marylhurst campus. And the planner for the sisters noted that there is a historic building there, that it's a small strip of land. It's surrounded by the resource protected area. But on page 25 of the proposal, there under policy 7, number B is devoted strictly to sub-area 1A, and item number 1 says uses should be located in a major building and no more than 2 buildings. So even though the planner was saying that that's a historic building and there's no plan for it to be removed, it talks about the possibility of multifamily housing on that narrow strip in one major building or two major buildings. So I don't feel that the proposal is sufficiently carefully written, and that is the core of my concern. And I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to say, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Campbell? I see none. Thank you. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Raymond Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes,
please state your name and address for the record, and please give testimony.
Yes, my name is Ray Lawrence, or Raymond Lawrence, at 17317 Brookhurst Drive in Lake Oswego, 97034. May I proceed?
Yes, thank you. Proceed.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, the City Commission, City Planning staff, and whoever else is in attendance. Unfortunately, until the most recent individual, I was not privy to any of the prior discussion, being on a Zoom call-in. But I do thank you for the opportunity to express my opposition to the application for this property once known as Marylhurst University, or case file LU-20-0016. To provide some perspective, my wife and I reside at Marylhurst Development, which is directly across the street from Mary's Woods and the former Marylhurst University properties. As you all know, the two adjacent properties are owned by the applicants, I'll assume applicants. We have been a resident in this neighborhood for over 25 years, since its inception. Over time, we have witnessed substantial land usage changes as requested by the Sisters of the Holy Name. Before I begin to enumerate the reasons why we are asking you to not approve this request, I must state that several of my comments relate, in part, to practices that unfolded during the development and construction of the Mary's Woods project. Since the applicant also owns the property in question, I believe that inferences I make and concerns that I express about patterns of requested variances to code by the applicant during the build-out of Mary's Woods is germane to this discussion. Therefore, I will speak about our experience with Mary's Woods as an indication of what I believe we can expect if this code variance is approved. Let me begin by first stating that we have always supported, in fact, almost always supported, the previous variances as submitted by the applicant. This is the first time I find it necessary to oppose one of their requests. As the chair and staff and commission may know, there have been several major variances approved for the Mary's Woods project over time. And the present situation is not consistent with the original approved plan. This fact is indicative of the practice of changing the plan as the construction project progresses. While this may be a good business decision and action on the part of the applicant, I do not believe it is necessarily translates into a good neighborhood plan. So why am I asking you to not approve this request? I'm opposed to this application for many reasons. First, because I believe low-cost housing, no matter how noble, is substantially inconsistent with the neighborhood and the adjacent to the university and to the other surrounding areas. As property owners, we must all be concerned about changes to the code. The code, in part, is meant to protect property values and livability. Therefore, it is incumbent upon affected owners to weigh the risk that the code changes could negatively impact our property values and lifestyles. In this case, I believe the risk of devaluation is great based on the substantial proposed changes of use. As the previous person indicated, over 50 acres. And I'm not at a point where I'm willing to trust that it will be developed properly. I do not believe anyone would have imagined Marylhurst University would cease to exist after being a vital college and later university for over 100 years. Those who bought property around the university could not have planned or foreseen the question before us today. Granting such a major code use variance could put some property owners in financial jeopardy. Third, I am concerned about the potential of substantial additional traffic congestion in the area. It's already pretty bad in the afternoons. How many of these residents will enter and exit the one exiting road that runs through the college? And how much additional parking will be necessary to accommodate high density dwelling? How will this impact the overall feel, or for lack of a better word, ambiance of the adjacent neighborhoods, especially if it's brought forward? Fourth, as a previous supporter of this applicant, I am now disappointed by their continual application for zoning and code variances.
Time.
I am also, go ahead.
Mr. Lawrence, you've exceeded your time. I'll give you another 30 seconds if you'd like to wrap up.
Okay. I guess the bottom line is, we've been down this road many, many times. We now have a shopping center across the street that was not in the original plan. They make good business decisions that are good for them, but it's not great for the neighborhood. While I'm pleased with some of the development in Mary's Woods, I am certainly not pleased with this proposal. But I ask the commission, the planning zoning folks, to not approve this variance the way it is written and proposed at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Lawrence? None. All right, thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Jean, if you'd like to call the next person.
Norma Pritchard.
Ms. Pritchard, if you'd state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Peyton Pritchard, 17555 Gleason Drive, apartment 113 in Mary's Woods. I recognize some of you people. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Scott.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Lawrence?
The
point of order here, Mr. Pritchard, 1 second. Ms. Reardon, Mike was on. If you could please mute. Sorry about that. Mr. Pritchard, go ahead and you may continue.
Yes, so Norm and I were very excited about the fact that workforce housing could be provided on a portion of the Mary's Woods campus. When we first heard about it, and a number of other people here heard about it, there was a lot of concern. And one of the letters that I sent, actually, Norma and I are co-signers on that letter, where we were actually acting sort of as mitigators to some of the people who were really concerned about it. So we talked about it and met, and my feeling was that if we were able to work with the sisters in producing whatever this project might turn out to be, that we could make it a better project. Not that we would try to dictate anything, but anyway, we were supporters and we wanted to remain supporters until I read the staff report. And actually, Yvonne Campbell stated our position very well. The entire campus should not be rezoned for in this manner, especially sub-area 1A. And but even the part of the campus that is west of the BP John building should not be as part of the zone change right now. The way that it's written, changing the entire campus area gives them the opportunity to develop that area sometime in the future, which would not be what they've stated. It's been not what they told us in all the various original presentations. And so we feel that it's sort of a breach of trust and a breach of our contract as people who bought into Mary's Woods, the fact that they now are asking for a rezone of the entire campus area. We are in favor of the workforce housing. We're in favor of rezoning that part of the campus so that that is possible, but we are not in favor of rezoning the entire campus, and we especially don't understand why Subarea 1A is involved in it, because a number of things about that that are stated in the staff report aren't right. For example, there's no sidewalks along Gleason. It is a historic building. It should remain as is, and it is much more a part of the Mary's Woods campus than it is really Marylhurst. So we would like, we are not asking for this to be denied. We're asking to be continued to allow the sisters and their applicants to change the area that they want designated as being rezoned. And we would like that to come to another future hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Pritchard? None? Thank you. Jean, would you like to call the next person?
Darcy and Sean Reardon.
Hi there, thank you. My name is Darcy and, well, my husband Sean Reardon. We live at 17387 Brookhurst Drive. We just like to go on the record that we are opposed, prime concerns being the increase in traffic to the facility being redeveloped. With that and the low income housing, if there's multiple family dwellings within those, to add on to the increase of traffic. And then having two kids myself go through Hallinan Elementary, which at the time my youngest left, which was 3 years ago, we were busting at the seams. And I missed the first part of this discussion to know if the study has been recent in terms of the impact it's having on our schools that are already not just Hallinan, but as it filters and we rezone through River Grove, are already at capacity in pods. And at the time my son had left, they were opening closets to make classrooms. So those are our biggest concerns, because we're seeing already a turn in Marylhurst with the young families moving in, and I'm concerned for their future because we're a very family-friendly neighborhood. So those are our biggest concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Reardon? None? Thank you. Jean, if you'd like to call the next person.
Harry Stesser.
You see connecting to audio. I'm not sure if they have established a connection yet, Jean.
Yeah, I don't see a connection there. Let's see. I'm not sure he's here yet. Here this far, Dave. Oh, we're into the.
Either for or against.
Oh yeah, Bill Schlodecker. I thought he was with us for a while. Oh, he's there.
Hello?
Okay, there we go.
But you have to hit. Can you hear me?
1 second, Mr. Schlodecker. I think we have Mr. Stosser.
Yes.
And yeah, so we'll take Mr. Stosser, and then we'll go to. If that's the end of the opposed, then we'll go. Yeah. So please, Mr. Stosser, if you will state your name and address for the record, and go ahead and give your testimony.
Okay. Yeah. Like the Reardons, it's Mark and Terry Stosser. We live at 17382 Brookhurst Drive. We've been here for 18 years, and I'm an old school guy, and I listened to all the reports when they expanded Mary's Woods. And I remember when several of us went downtown to see the city managers. And I remember saying, has anybody actually stood out there? Because I've been walking my dog for the last 12 years. And it pre-COVID, which I think has kind of got some people thinking the traffic isn't that bad, although it's picking up again. If you go back and watch the growth after they put the Mary's Woods in, and these businesses haven't even really expanded yet because, of course, COVID has impacted them. The traffic was an absolute crawl every morning, an absolute crawl every afternoon. And to some of the earlier points that people were making, the city has got people now coming through it thanks to things like Waze.
I'm sorry, I believe that was administrative error there. Hopefully we can get him back.
Yeah, let's give a minute to see if Mr. Stosur can rejoin.
Perhaps we could go to Mr. Schledecker and hope that Mr. Stosur comes back to us.
Sure. Jean, just for a point of clarification, the next are people that are neither for or against. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're at the end of our list of people who have indicated they're opposed.
Okay. I'll take testimony from individuals that are testifying neither for or against. Would you like to call the next person then, Jean?
Mr. Stodecker, is he still here? He was opposed. Indicated he was opposed.
Okay.
With that, we'll start on neither for nor against. Judy Hammerstadt, is she here? I don't see her on the list. She did sign up. Let's see. We have two more who I don't see on the participant roster. Sarah Martinez and Kim Masari. They were neither for nor against. And I don't see them here at all. And another one who was neither for nor against on our roster is David Panicello. And I don't see him either. Let me check the list and make sure we've covered everyone who we can connect with. We could send the invitation back to Mr. Stosur, who was cut off. Let me do that.
maybe while Gene is doing that, I'll just, I said I wouldn't do this, but if anybody's trying to call in, anybody's, is bumped out and needs to get back in, call Cat Kluge at 503-635-0286. 503-635-0286. There's about a minute delay between the Zoom and the YouTube.
Okay, the invitation has been sent to Mr. Stesser.
Thank you, Gene. We'll give one more minute.
Mr. Chair, Evan Boone here. Just as a suggestion, you could go ahead and let the applicant do rebuttal, and if Mr. Schlechter or the other four maybe we're bumped off on a call in, we can pick up that in rebuttal, after they talk. So
Sure. Thank you, Attorney Boone. So would the applicant like to give rebuttal now to the testimony you heard?
I would like to just take a minute to address some of the comments we heard about why the rezoning applies to the whole campus, all 50 acres. And it's a little bit technical, but it's really based on how the code is set up. The CI zoning applies to the whole entire site, and the code amendment that we're making is a very small change to add multifamily as a permitted use in the CI zone. So there isn't an easy, clean opportunity to define anything less than the whole area that's zoned CI without kind of drawing new property lines or creating a new legal description or doing something pretty expansive besides what we've proposed. And so I know it is concerning to citizens to see the multifamily being allowed on the whole 50 acres, but it's more technically why it's a technical reason why we're doing it, because of the way the code's set up and not necessarily the intent of the sisters in their development plan. So I did want to just state that, and I think the staff did a really good job of kind of explaining how it's set up and why it works that way, but I just wanted to say that again, and I think we've stated many times here that there's no intention to take down the historic buildings, change the character of the campus. In fact, a lot of that is baked into the code already, so there's a lot of approval criteria and policies in the code that say that the area has to maintain campus-like character and have open space, and the natural resources are protected, the trees are protected. So there's a lot of safeguards against things changing dramatically out there. So I just, I thought that sounded like that was coming up a lot and a big one of contention. So I just wanted to address that really quickly.
Thank you.
Commissioners, this is Chris Bramer from Kittleson. If I may just briefly respond to some of the transportation issues we've heard this evening. Bottom line summary is the applicant has volunteered a condition of approval that the city and Oregon Department of Transportation have both agreed with, whereby the campus will not be allowed to generate any more traffic with proposed addition of housing than was previously generated by the university. This gives basically the city carte blanche assurance that there will be no increase in traffic. It will be monitored as each new development application comes in. And so from a traffic impact perspective, there simply is no increase in traffic allowed. With respect to cut-through traffic on the highway from I-205 and other locations, that's something that's simply above and beyond the control of this project and really is not relevant to the conversation. So I just wanted to pass that along and be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding traffic.
Thank you. Is there any other individual that would like to give a rebuttal from the applicant? I see none. Commissioners, any questions on the rebuttal? None? Thank you. Jean, were we able to get anybody to rejoin?
Not yet. We're trying both of Mr. Stesser's email addresses.
That's weird.
We're trying to call him, so we might
Sure.
be able to get him back.
Attorney Boone, one point of question. It looks like based on a discussion we had at the start of the meeting that we'll want to continue. Could we continue the hearing and allow public testimony for those who were on the list but either had issues or didn't testify tonight?
Well, yes, we are basically at the point where I would ask whether any person wishes to continue the public hearing. And if they do so, then it would be continued to a date certain. And then the commission would make a decision as to whether to allow for additional written testimony or for additional oral and written testimony. Normally, since planning commission isn't familiar with that, normally that happens by providing additional 7 days for people to submit written testimony. And then there's a rebuttal period of that new written evidence for about 3 days.
YouTube.
No.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Stosur, we'll get to you in a second if you could just please mute.
Oh, okay.
One second. Yeah, no problem.
Well, I hate to lose him. And so there will be the opportunity for the commission to consider continuance opportunity, but let's go ahead and finish out the testimony first.
Sure. Yeah, sorry about that, Mr. Stosur, for the technical difficulties, but please continue your testimony.
Okay, well, thank you. And I appreciate the nice lady that helped me get back in. Again, we've been here for 18 years. We're very involved in the community, whether it was youth sports, my wife working at the school. But, some of the earlier comments, I keep hearing these trip counts and I keep hearing, and my message really is what my eyes have watched over the last 18 years. And 43 is a nightmare. And it's already getting back to that level. People are running these red lights like it's going out of style. You think you were in New York City. And when I look at these businesses across the street now, the growth of Mary's Woods and the total population of cars that are now utilizing 43 to either circumvent 5 to get downtown or to, get down to Oregon City or Westland. People that didn't used to come through here are now coming through here. And I just think the last traffic report, quite frankly, when they did the Mary's Woods expansion, was outdated. And nobody wanted to hear it. All the people downtown wanted to hear was how the new tower was going to remind them of being in Italy, a quote I will never forget. So as some of the other people who have opposed this, it's not that we're against, helping people out, but this area just cannot sustain that kind of growth. And I'm still concerned that once we get past the COVID issue, that you're going to see 43 back to a point where from 3:30 to 6, you can walk faster. So anyway, as some of my neighbors also said, I just think that rezoning the entire thing can lead to an even bigger traffic problem down the road. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to come back in.
Thank you, Ms. Stosur. Commissioners, any questions? Ms. Stosur? None? Attorney Boone, should we allow a rebuttal from the applicant again?
Yes, Mr. Chair, probably no more than a minute.
Okay, thank you. The applicant, would you like to give rebuttal?
This is Chris Bramer again for the record. With respect to the traffic analysis, there has been no new analysis during this COVID period in terms of new traffic counts. This really, understand that traffic is down now and it will increase again. The point with traffic in this situation is simply that there is a site-specific trip cap being volunteered on the property that will ensure that the property doesn't generate more trips than it used to as university. That trip cap is a pretty common trip mitigation technique for rezones, and I think that's why you're seeing city staff as well as the Oregon Department of Transportation basically saying, yeah, this is standard practice, no issue here, there is no new traffic impact. And I'll conclude with that.
Thank you. No other rebuttal. Attorney Boone.
Okay. Yeah, so at this point, I would ask any person who has testified or otherwise, who has to be on the Zoom, has to be here though, of course. Prior to closing the public hearing, any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. If a request is made, the public hearing will be either continued to a date certain, to, not less than 7 days later, or the record shall remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing to enable additional written evidence or testimony to be submitted, and the commission would establish the period for any rebuttal evidence to be submitted. Is there any such request?
Yes, I'd like to submit additional evidence.
Okay, I believe that was Carolyn Jones's voice. Is that correct, Ms. Jones?
Correct.
All right. All right, so a request has been made to continue the public hearing for additional evidence. So the question now to the commission is whether you wish to continue it for written evidence only, or to provide the opportunity for both the written and additional oral testimony at the next meeting.
And Mr. Chair, I just would remind you that at the beginning of the meeting, Planner Numanoglou pointed out that the city has received written testimony as well, and you haven't had an opportunity to read that yet. So that's part of the record, and that'll be provided to the commission and to the public. So you'll have that for your consideration when you meet again, whether it's to continue the hearing or to deliberate.
Thank you. So I'll open it up for comment commissioners. Commissioners, any feedback on should we continue the hearing with written testimony only, or written and oral both? Stuart, looks like you had a comment.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe since there are pieces of written evidence that we haven't had a chance to review, that at the very least we should continue the hearing in order to be able to review that evidence and maybe consider opening it up to accept written evidence only, since I think we got a pretty broad and comprehensive overview from citizens that are both opposed and against. I think we got a pretty good idea of sort of the spectrum of concerns. So that's my suggestion.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, one question to Attorney Boone. You started by saying this is a quasi-judicial. So are we just ruling on whether or not the applicant met their burden, or are we doing something else?
Well, the applicant has the burden to show that all of the policies that were policies and standards that were identified by the staff or by any other person, although I haven't yet heard any person refer to a specific policy or criteria, that those policies are met, and then either as the applicant is presented, or whether the application can be modified in order to meet those policies.
Thank you. Also, Ms. Jones, are you asking for additional testimony or just to submit a written version?
Well, I have Parkinson's. Typing is a problem. I prefer to give it verbal, but I could probably make arrangements to get it written if necessary.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher, do you want to make a recommendation then to allow written only or written and oral testimony? Is there any recommendation that you have?
Well, since Ms. Jones said that she would be happy to just do written, I'll make a recommendation that we accept additional written testimony. And then at the next meeting, just consider the additional written testimony.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Other commissioners, any input you'd like to provide?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
So Commissioner Whitman, just to clarify, you're saying you concur with the suggestion of written only testimony?
Written only, yes.
Yes. Any other feedback, commissioners? Well, I guess my input would be similar to the other commissioners we heard from, is to provide written testimony too. So continue the hearing with the opportunity to provide written testimony. And then Attorney Boone, could you clarify the other parameters that was suggested?
Well, and then there needs to be an opportunity for any person to submit evidence in rebuttal of that new evidence, as a rebuttal period. So typically a motion would be as like this: to continue the public hearing to October 26, with the opportunity to submit additional written evidence by October 19, close of business, and any rebuttal evidence to that new evidence which is submitted by the 19th to be submitted by the 21st, close of business. And that provides the staff the opportunity to gather it all up on the 22nd and half of 23rd to get a memo out to the commission in anticipation of the 26th hearing. That is just typically the way it's done at DRC, so that's why I suggest that.
I would move in accordance with his language.
Commissioner Whitman has made a motion to approve based on Attorney Boone's outline of the procedure. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Beckett's seconds. I guess all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone against? On any abstains? On. So the motion is to approve to continue the hearing. The hearing will be continued to October 26th, sorry. The hearing will be continued to October 26th. The request is to for individuals to submit their testimony by October 19th, close of business, and then that the rebuttal be submitted by October 21st, close of business.
All right, and I would just emphasize it's rebuttal to the new evidence of October 19, not rebuttal to anything that's in the testimony tonight.
Right. Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
And that should do it, Mr. Chair, for this matter at this time.
All right. I'd like to close the public hearing for tonight and continue it to October 26th as the motion was approved. Okay, so next on our agenda is schedule review. Director Siegel.
Thank you, Chair Heap. Your next meeting is October 26th, as you just discussed, the continuation of the hearing that you began tonight to consider written testimony. And you also have an update. It'll be presented by Senior Planner Olson on House Bills 2001 and 2003. And I believe that is it for the next meeting. Also wanted to check in with the commission on a request from the city manager's office that all the boards and commissions begin or actually complete their goal setting for 2021 in November, so that the council, including the who will be the newly seated council members at the beginning of the year, have your inputs as they begin goal setting this fall and later into the winter. So I've exchanged some messages with Chair Heap, and I think tentatively, subject to your direction, we would put two work sessions on the Planning Commission schedule for the two meetings in November. The first meeting for the commissioners to provide input on goal setting, and the second meeting to affirm your goals or affirm your recommendation. And then sometime between now And then subject to your, direction or how you'd like to proceed in gathering public input, staff is, prepared to put public information out as we've done in the past to encourage the public to provide input to you for goal setting. So it's a fairly condensed timeline this year. The city's beginning, or the council anticipates beginning goal setting earlier than they have in the past. Typically, they would wait until the beginning of the year. But this year they would like to begin that this fall. So those are the updates on the schedule, and again, seeking some input on the goal setting process.
Yeah, thank you, Director Siegel. So as I had discussed with Director Siegel, I'd like to propose that commissioners in particular think about goals they'd like to recommend, and that the commissioners provide that feedback to myself and Vice Chair Pape and Director Siegel no later than November 1st by 5 p.m. In between now and November 1st, we'd be happy to discuss, with any commissioners. I mean, please reach out and contact me, and I can discuss any goals that they would like to recommend for consideration. So then that would kind of put together a list of goals to be reviewed at our November 9th meeting. That's the first meeting in November. And then our second meeting, November 23rd, as Director Siegel was saying, we'd like to have our proposed goals finalized so that they could be provided to the council for review. So again, the kind of the timeframes that we're talking about is November 1st, all commissioners submit any goals they would like to be put on the list for consideration. And that would be November 1st by 5 p.m. Those would get then sent to Director Siegel, Vice Chair Pape, and myself. And then at our November 9th meeting, that would be the starting list that we'd review, and then also take public input on. I do think a key piece of our goal setting is to hear from the neighborhoods, hear from the community on what they think is important. So I know it's a little late tonight, but hopefully the communities, neighborhood associations and the rest of the community is still watching. So I encourage all community members who wish to, suggest goals, provide to the Planning Commission. You can email to the Planning Commission at the address on the website. I think in the past we've had a survey, but as Director Siegel was saying, we're kind of on a tight time lane. So definitely very interested in receiving the input from the community on our goals, our 2021 goals. And kind of that's the process we'd like to follow. Commissioners, any suggestions or concerns with the process outlined for goals? Commissioner Beckett?
Yes, what we're going to be getting into in the next meeting, beginning to discuss the conclusions or the recommendations that have come out of many different meetings regarding House Bill 2001 and 2003. The effect of those two bills is huge, huge. It will transform in many ways what our city is like. So the citizens need to be aware of it. The commissioners need to look at it very carefully. The city staff is going to be very busy to follow through on what comes next. So that'll be a huge matter of discussion for the next few months.
Thank you, Commissioner Beckett. Commissioners, any other comments on our goals? Okay. Director Siegel, anything else you'd like to call out for a schedule review?
Not for schedule review, but just as a point of information so that the commissioners are aware. The city's been still in the emergency response mode with COVID, and businesses are, I read someplace, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, that there are over 90,000 restaurants across the country that shut down, that had shut down as of July. And I'm sure that more have closed since then due to the restrictions and the pandemic. And so one of the code changes that the Planning Commission reviewed earlier this year and the council adopted was allowing the seasonal dining enclosures And as you may recall, the city initiated that code change before the pandemic even began. So it wasn't with that in mind that we proposed it, but it turned out that it was something that could help. So the cities continue to receive requests from business owners, not just restaurants, but other businesses that are looking for some regulatory relief over the next 6 months or perhaps longer in order to maintain physical distancing and comply with COVID restrictions. So in terms of some restaurant owners have approached the city and said that they are wanting to do minor improvements to add covered areas or shelter over outdoor seating areas. Some have inquired about putting up tents or other temporary structures in parking lots. I mean, it's very severe. The kind of the stress that these businesses are under. So we're trying to be resourceful. We're trying to be flexible, and the mayor and some members of the council have asked us to explore alternatives along those lines. So I'll be going to council on the 20th with some concepts and some ideas that members of the business community have asked us to look into. We don't have any direction at this point. I just wanted you to be aware of that. So if any direction does come from council at that meeting, we would anticipate bringing that to the planning commission for your input before any code changes are adopted. So it's happening in real time. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Sure. Thank you, Director Siegel.
Thank you.
All right. No other business under schedule review. Then I'll move to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.